All the materials I use I try not to pay for. I try to scrounge or recycle.
So what made you think of using videotape?
Because the kids in the street, they're always wheeling it out and hanging it in trees, and they never know what to do with it. They like it, but they don't know what to do with it. And I thought, right, stress.
So you think there'll ever be a market for things like this?
I doubt it. It'll be very uncomfortable, I think, to wear. It's a fun thing, you know. It's how far you can take it, what you can do with it. So, like, it's ideal for this fashion show. But everyday wear, no. It's full of static. It's dreadfully full of static.
Oh, Jeff, this is gorgeous.
There was a saying in China in the 1980s, first development, then environment. The country entered the global marketplace without much regard for the environmental consequences of such rapid growth.
I feel like I'm in a movie or something. We're going to set up meetings. Exciting. Hi, Han.
Hello?
How are you? Hello?
Hello?
Can you hear me? We're coming to Beijing on Tuesday, so we'll get in on Wednesday.
You mean tomorrow?
Yeah, right, exactly. Jeff and I set out to make a movie about how Beijing cleaned up for the Olympics. How that moment could be the spark for something new and interesting in China as its people began to see the importance of a healthy environment. We know that China has some of the most significant environmental challenges in the world, but this movie is about the opportunities that these challenges present.
Something is going on in China, something new and revealing that seems to me moving in the right direction. I mean, China has enormous problems. There's no question about it when it comes to the environment. And it's taken a long time for that kind of understanding to penetrate up into the, the ruling group. Well, you could say that's been a problem in the United States too for the last several years, quite frankly.
I think there's a preconceived notion by a lot of people, particularly in the United States, that China is a third world country, and we have certain images that we believe are associated with third world countries. We don't believe that involves modern cities with people who are rising into the middle class. To host the Olympics and to use the environment as one of the major themes of the Olympics could be a crossroads for this country, and only time will tell if it does become that crossroads. The Olympics is more than what's occurring on the field. It snapshots what we value as a civilization, what we find important.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Shunyi Olympic Rowing Canoeing Park. To maintain an orderly flow and to make sure your smooth and fast entry into the venue, please wait in queues for security checks based on instructions from our staff members. And please get your tickets ready in your hand for inspection. Before your security checks...
China won their bid to host the Olympic Games by pledging to make drastic improvements throughout Beijing, promises that would make it the most expensive games ever. They built an entirely new subway line and ring road, along with other upgrades to the transportation system. Olympic venues were constructed with a focus on green design and energy efficiency, and public campaigns such as those against littering began long before the Olympic torch was lit.
They invested $40 billion in preparing for these games. They closed 350 of the most polluting industries in the Beijing region. And they also pulled half of the automobiles off the road. And even with those drastic measures, they were unable to clear the air by the time of opening ceremonies. I was in China in August of 2007, and it was pretty horrific trying to breathe on a daily basis. And the first few days of the games here looked just as bad as they did a year ago.
With the opening ceremonies of the Summer Olympics just 12 days away, key Olympic venues in the host city Beijing are barely visible. It appears that dramatic efforts to clear the air in the Chinese capital haven't worked.
It's one of the first questions we were always asked in TV interviews or newspaper interviews. I just remember for months and months and months hearing about the environment in the media. One of the big controversies was a few of our bike riders arrived in China and wore air masks. They were actually available to all U.S. athletes if we wanted them, but no one really took them up on that offer except for a few. And the pictures were everywhere in the press in Beijing, and generally I think the sentiment was that the Chinese government and people were offended.
The API, or Air Pollution Index, is measured daily in Beijing. It measures the levels of 5 atmospheric pollutants: sulfur dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, suspended particulates, carbon monoxide, and ozone. These readings have been on the decline over the past decade, but still do not meet the standards set by the World Health Organization. The average annual reading in Beijing is around 100, but levels often rise above 300 on some days, posing severe and immediate health risks. Any day that the API number is below 100 is considered a blue sky day. Instances of these have been increasing along with lower overall air pollution.
We still have the situation that something like 15 of the 20 most air polluted cities in the world are in China. There's one city that is only seen by satellite about once a year because the pollution over it is so bad. So the Beijing Olympics was an interesting showcase for Chinese technical prowess. And they structured it as a Green Olympics.
Even if there's nothing substantial has been done to live up to the name of Green Olympics, the word, the concept has entered the mindset of many Chinese because of Olympics, because of this rampant publicity campaign. Green Olympics does become the buzzword and has entered the daily language or vocabulary of Chinese people nowadays. And some NGOs, they have smartly used this excuse, this golden chance to get their own message crossover.
This Olympic game will leave a true environmental legacy to Beijing. There's a growing social awareness about the environmental challenge. China's environmental movement started first in the 80s. We have the first environmental NGO registered formally in the year 1994. That was the Friend of Nature. Now, according to a new survey, there are about 200 active environmental groups in China. The Chinese government have changed the policy and now started talking about sustainable development, and it understands that it cannot achieve that single-handedly. It needs the broader social public participation.
The public participation process, I think that's the big step made by the government to try to involve the public, not just designed by the officials or by the academic society.
In the year 2003, we have the first ever law in China which requires public participation in decision-making process. That happened to be an environmental law.
We don't really have the power that the government has to say, you can be here, but you can't be here, very much from the top down, which is needed. The advantage that the NGO or the nonprofit area has is that we can work from the bottom up in a way that's, dare I say, a little less threatening, I suppose, than if it was the government per se. I think the Olympics takes a lot of different meanings. You know, is it the greenification of Beijing? Is it about China more as a whole? Is it about China's entry into the world? And in which case, all of our programs relate to that. I mean, we deal with Chinese businesses operating overseas. We deal with rural development in China, which has a bearing on urbanization, how cities grow, things like that. I think this is pretty unprecedented to have organizations like us working in the world's biggest coal consumer has such a heavy carbon footprint as a country as a whole. So I feel like somebody who can work within China is definitely needed. I think civil society is growing, particularly in the environment field. And I mean, I would hope the trend continues. I would hope it becomes more and more open. I mean, I think China is particularly open when it comes to the environment. I think it's a less politically sensitive issue than certain other things are.
Media has really played a very important role to promote public awareness and the knowledge about the environment.
9 out of 10 times, the first question I encountered would be, can you really do journalism in China if there is no freedom of speech? I think there's still some way to go before Chinese media fully opens its up. Sometimes we tend to overestimate the importance of the governmental control. Actually, in today's China, if you are, as a journalist, if you are professionally enough, if you are smart enough, you can find one way or another to bypass the official limit, especially in terms of exposing social evils. Sometimes the government, more often than not, the government would agree that by exposing such evils, it will do good to our society. Chinese law tells us that we should defend our homeland, we should safeguard our environment, we should protect our planet.
Many people do not know where to look for environmental information, even if the information is official information that the government approved information. So I think information is very important for the public to become more aware of the kind of environment they are living in.
In the year 2006, I set up this local NGO called the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs, and we created this database, the China Water Pollution Map, as our first project.
The Ma Jun's website inspired a lot of interest because it provided information to the public, even though the information he provided was just the official data.
Of course, it is really take a long time from normal public participation to a real public participation, because the public itself, even you provide the channel, it does not mean you have the real participation, because it really involved the information disclosure, and also the public involved in this process. They should have a better knowledge to understand the issue.
These things are necessary for the public to know the direct impact of bad air or bad water to their health. I think that linkage is lacking in China.
China is in a critical stage, is in a transition time from the decision making from top-down approach to the combination of top-down with the bottom-up approach. One of the most important factors is that the political wills from the high-level government. Once you have a very high political wills, a lot of initiatives would start.
Different kinds of government have different advantages, and one of the advantages of the government in China is that the entire administrative structure follows whatever plan comes out of their every fifth-year People's Congress. The People's Congress gathers these people from all over the provinces. They have a lot of input, and then out comes the 5-year plan. All these mayors and sub-officials and provincial governors, career is dependent upon how they do in this national plan. The 5-year plan has been concentrated in the past on economic development. We can see the results of a collective countrywide effort in the buildings around us. It's no longer a third world country. In fact, it's challenging the most modern countries in the world in many aspects. In this new plan, something very interesting happened. Green and energy conserving projects went from something you should do to get some points to where now not only do you get points for doing it on your little stars on your career record, you also get deductions if you don't. So that means the whole nation suddenly and simultaneously begins to look at green as a way that they can advance their careers.
In many ways, people think that, China is the market for innovation because there's so much new that will happen. It's a more affordable, easier way to do it. There's an opportunity to make a difference before we have more of the very problems that we experience today. And again, the scale of it is so huge that you can create products and services on a much more affordable, lower cost basis.
The development of clean technology on any scale is a relatively recent phenomenon. In 1989, 90% of all the wind power in the world was in California. And another percent or two was in Hawaii, and that was mostly it. Today, Germany has maybe 40% of all the wind power in the world. Denmark, which has a population less than that of Massachusetts, is responsible for perhaps a third or more of all the wind turbines being sold in the world today. In solar panels that generate electricity, the so-called photovoltaic industry, China was not even in the ball game 10 years ago. They will, perhaps as soon as 2010, will produce more solar panels than the entire industry of the United States.
I'm optimistic that the build-up to the Olympics and the so-called Green Olympics and all these concerns that people have been talking about, all the attention in the news that environment is getting, that it has had an impact on Chinese people, and they are thinking more about the environment, even if some of it's forced. They're forced to not use plastic bags anymore. And so on a massive scale, all of the grocery stores are offering reusable bags now, which is an amazing thing. And that's one of the special things about China, is that if the government decides that something's going to change, it's forced on the people. And that's bound to have some kind of impact, because they can just ban plastic bags across the country and in stores, which is great. But the environmental movement itself, I think in China, it's still very young. And one of the other problems that we face is that it's very hard to register a nonprofit here. So I think if it was easier to register, then there would be lots more. I think that it's difficult. The government's not getting in our way, but they're not helping either, the way the U.S. government does.
I have known the routine choose group since 7th grade, when I was in junior high. Miss Wang is our geography teacher. They have a very, very good group. It's competitive, and I said, I really, really need to do something. I want to do something. And I became the project manager at first. And then I became the administrator, and we started to do the projects. The green hut, we call it. It's a recycling hut. We put recycled stuffs in here. Papers, bottles, and Tetra packages. The milk packages.
Milk?
Yeah. We made recycled boxes. inside our teaching buildings, and even the administrators get involved, and they're pretty impressed by this activity. And this is one of the most successful activities we have ever conducted.
Roots and Shoots is giving the leadership to the kids and letting them go, form their own projects, implement their own projects. There's also a mandate that teachers are supposed to be finding ways to inspire more creativity among kids because they've recognized that the Chinese education system doesn't have room for creativity.
I think kids in general in China are under huge pressure to learn. They still have a huge pressure of passing those entrance exams, so the teachers all have huge pressure to get students familiarized with previous exams. And if they don't get it right, then students have to repeat 100 times of the mistakes they made. Creativity rise from, being free, being liberal, and enjoying whatever you want to do, but they don't have much time for that.
We found that the young teachers who are really looking for something different love it. And some of the older ones, it's hard for them to change their ways. Now that they have made this declaration and encouraged teachers without giving them any direction, we found that this is a very good opportunity for Roots and Shoots, because we can go in and say to the teachers, here's an opportunity to let kids be creative, and we'll show you how to do it.
With the help of my dear classmates and the members, we got better and better, we got bigger and bigger, and now we are as famous as the Roots and Shoots of PK, affiliated high school of PKU.
By focusing on young people, you're hoping, presuming that when they change their attitudes and their behaviors as a kid, and they feel strongly about it because of the experience they've had working with Roots and Shoots projects, that they will grow up to be adults who do that.
We can do all these little things like just splitting the trash into kinds and recycling them, or maybe helping the animals, or maybe even just stop using plastic bags or turn off the lights whenever you leave. It starts from those little things. I never thought that little things would be that important, and I never thought we could do anything. I thought it was all up to the government until I joined this group. It feels like that I could make a difference, we all could make a difference, and that is the belief of the Roots and Shoots group.
The whole system, whether you're talking about the government or the education system or the schools, the teachers, it's very much been for years and years a top-down kind of thing. So teachers are used to listening to the principals, and the students are used to listening to the teachers, whereas Roots and Shoots is a bottom-up approach. Roots and Shoots is giving the leadership to the kids.
We're educating ourselves because we're going to be the leading force of the future. Then maybe when we become a part of the government, and when we become like the leading of a company, we will tell about our feelings about the environment. And those differences are not just what we did today, it will be a lot bigger. And what made that happen? It is our kind of movements now that started this kind of root in our heart, and that is what's most important.
When Beijing moved polluting factories out of the city limits, they adopted cleaner emission standards. When half the cars were taken off the road during the Olympics, the public responded so positively to the lessened pollution and traffic that in April 2009, the central government passed a law continuing the regulations until April 2010.
Of course, the emergency measures should not be just perpetuated because they are emergency measures. But, the stakeholders need to sit down and review the situation and work together to tackle the gaps identified and the problems found during the, this cleanup efforts.
They've taken efforts to go further than any other Summer Olympic city to be environmentally aware. The question for me is, in a city of 17 million, in a country of 1.3 billion, what impact will this 17-day event have on the way China changes its perspective of the environment? Will the citizens of this country say, wait a minute, we actually enjoyed having clean air and safe water to drink during the Olympics, why can't we have that now? And what impact will that have on China when the residents start demanding that they have that possibility every day of their lives?
So that's a new picture. What do you think of that one?
It's a scuba diving fish. It has a scuba tank. It's a really dirty environment and nobody would really want to live in it. And that's because people leave trash on the street and that goes through the catch basin. And it goes into the ocean because the catch basin leads to the ocean. If the fish didn't have that scuba diving tank, then it would soon die.
The fish in the scuba gear is a great symbol of how we're not keeping anything clean.
Even if we're not at the beach, we can still help the beach by not throwing things into the gutter. Because once you throw stuff into the gutter, it goes up straight to the ocean.
Think about that, you know? What are your thoughts on that?
Ew. Trash and more trash and more trash.
It was nasty. I think that people should just be more careful where they put their garbage. They should always throw it into a trash can, not just anywhere they want.
There's lots of water bottles, like going down the steps and leading right into the drain. The water bottles are like forming like a river leading to the ocean. It also feels like it's the Great Wall of China.
Well, I think people should protect the ocean and try to recycle more. They should try to recycle cans and crush them.
Don't pollute anything.
Ocean equals life.
Keep oceans alive!
Keep the world clean and everybody will be happy. Yeah, that's all.